Jake Morrison floated through the corridors of the new dawn, his magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor with each step. 3 months had passed since humanity made contact with their first alien species, and he still couldn't believe he was here. The research vessel felt more like home now than the small farm in Ohio where he grew up. He checked his watch and quickened his pace. Today was important. Today he would meet the Vellani scientist who would work with him on the cultural exchange program. Jake had studied everything available about the Vellani people. They were tall, graceful beings with skin that glowed with soft patterns of light. Most amazing of all, they could speak to each other with their minds. The laboratory doors slid open with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside and looked around the bright, clean space. Equipment from both human and Vellani technology filled the room. But what caught his attention was the figure standing near the far wall. She was definitely Vellani, but something was different. Where other Vellani Jake had seen wore simple, flowing clothes that showed their natural light patterns, this one was covered from neck to toe in heavy, dark robes. Even her hands were hidden inside thick gloves. Only her face was visible, and even that was partially hidden by a hood. "You must be Lieutenant Morrison," she said in perfect English. Her voice was soft but clear. "I am Kara. I will be working with you." Jake smiled and stepped forward. "Just call me Jake. It's great to finally meet you." Kira took a small step backward. Jake noticed the movement and stopped where he was. Something in her posture told him to keep his distance. "I have prepared some materials for our first session," Kira said, gesturing to a table covered with data pads and strange devices Jake didn't recognize. "We should begin with basic comparisons between human and Vellani biology." As they worked, Jake found himself fascinated by Kira's intelligence. She asked questions about human anatomy that he had never considered. Her understanding of complex biological systems was impressive, but there were things about her that puzzled him. Unlike other Vellani he had observed, Kira never used telepathy. She spoke only with words, and Jake never felt the gentle mental touch that other Vellani used for simple communication. She also kept a careful distance between them at all times. When Jake moved closer to look at something she was showing him, she would shift away. "The human cardiovascular system is more robust than ours," Kira explained, pointing to a diagram. "Your species can survive injuries that would be fatal to Vellani." "What about healing?" Jake asked. "I heard that Vellani can heal faster than humans." Kira's hand went to her arm, touching the thick fabric of a robe. "Some can," she said quietly. "Others heal more slowly. It depends on the individual." Jake noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Are you okay? Do you need a break?" "I am fine," Kira said quickly. She turned back to the data pad, but Jake could see tension in her shoulders. Commander Lisa Hayes entered the lab just then. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "How is our first session going?" she asked. "Very well," Jake replied. "Kira has been sharing some amazing insights about Vellani biology." Hayes looked at Kira with a slight frown. "I hope you'll be more forthcoming in future sessions." "The other Vellani representatives have been much more open about sharing their culture with us." Kira's head dropped lower. "I apologize if my methods are not satisfactory." "Just try to be more cooperative," Hayes said before leaving. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. He waited until Hayes was gone before speaking. "Don't listen to her. You're doing great work here." Kira looked up at him with surprise. "You do not find me difficult to work with?" "Difficult? Are you kidding?" "You're brilliant. I've learned more about comparative biology in 2 hours than I did in 2 weeks of reading reports." For the first time, Jake saw something that might have been a smile cross Kira's face, but it disappeared quickly. They worked for several more hours. Jake noticed that Kira never removed her gloves, even when handling delicate instruments. She also seemed to avoid the brightest lights in the lab, staying in the dimmer corners when possible. As the day ended, Jake began packing up his equipment. Same time tomorrow? He asked. Kira nodded. Yes. Tomorrow we will discuss neural systems. As she gathered her materials, one of her data pads slipped from her hands. It hit the floor with a sharp crack. Kira bent quickly to pick it up, and for just a moment, her sleeve pulled back. Jake caught a glimpse of her wrist. Where there should have been the soft, glowing skin he had seen on other Vellani, there was only dark, scarred tissue. The natural light patterns were completely gone, replaced by rough, damaged skin. Kira realized what had happened. She yanked her sleeve down and took several steps away from Jake. Her breathing became quick and shallow. Don't look at me, she whispered in her own language. Jake didn't understand the words, but he understood the pain in her voice. Instead of leaving or looking away, Jake did something unexpected. He sat down on the floor near where she stood. Not close enough to make her feel trapped, but close enough to show he wasn't going anywhere. I'm not looking at anything you don't want me to see, he said quietly. But I'm not leaving either. Kira stared at him with wide eyes. You should go. I am not like the others. I am damaged. We're all damaged. In some way, Jake said. That doesn't make you less valuable or less worthy of friendship. They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Kira's breathing slowed to normal. She pulled her sleeves down carefully and adjusted her robes. Why did you stay? She asked. Jake thought about it. Because that's what humans do. When someone is hurting, we stay. We don't always know how to help, but we stay. Kira studied his face as if trying to understand something foreign and strange. Your species is very different from mine. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Jake said. The next morning, Jake arrived at the lab early. He wasn't sure if Kira would come back. When the doors opened and she walked in, still covered in her heavy robes, he felt relief wash over him. Good morning, he said simply. Good morning, Jake, she replied. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something important. 2 weeks passed since Jake first saw Kira's scars. They worked together every day, and slowly, Jake began to notice small changes. Kira still kept her distance, but she no longer flinched when he moved around the lab. She even started asking him personal questions about human culture. Do all humans live in family groups? She asked one afternoon while they studied brain scans. Most do, Jake replied. I grew up on a farm with my parents and 2 sisters. What about Vellani families? Kira was quiet for a long moment. Vellani families are very close. We share thoughts and emotions freely. It creates strong bonds. That sounds nice, Jake said. Do you miss your family? Sometimes, Kira said softly. But it is complicated. Jake wanted to ask more, but something in her voice told him to wait. He was learning that Kira would share things when she was ready, not when he pushed. Dr. Peter Collins joined them that day to observe their work. He was a tall man with a beard who specialized in alien psychology. Jake had worked with him before and knew he meant well, but Collins could be impatient. Fascinating, Collins said as he watched Kira explain Vellani neural pathways. But I notice you're not demonstrating any telepathic abilities. The other Vellani representatives have been very generous in showing us how their mental communication works. Kira's hands clenched into fists. I prefer verbal communication. But surely you could give us just a small demonstration? It would be invaluable for our research. I said no. Kira's voice was sharp, sharper than Jake had ever heard it. Collins looked surprised. I don't understand the resistance. The other Vellani seemed proud of their abilities. Jake stepped forward. Dr. Collins, maybe we should focus on what Kira is comfortable sharing. She's already taught us more about Velani biology than anyone else. Collins frowned. Lieutenant Morrison, this is a scientific exchange. Personal comfort shouldn't override the mission. The mission is to build understanding between our species, Jake said firmly. That won't happen if we make our partners uncomfortable. After Collins left, Kira was quiet for the rest of the day. She worked with her head down, avoiding eye contact. Jake could see tension in every line of her body. Want to take a break? He suggested. We could go to the observation deck. The view of the nebula is amazing right now. Kira looked up in surprise. You would want to spend free time with me? Of course, why wouldn't I? They walked through the ship's corridors together. Jake noticed that other crew members stared at Kira as they passed. Some looked curious, others seemed uncomfortable. Kira kept her head down and stayed close to the wall. The observation deck was nearly empty. Large windows showed the swirling colors of a distant nebula, painting space in shades of purple and gold. Jake found 2 chairs facing the view and sat down. Kira hesitated before taking the chair next to his, leaving an empty seat between them. It's beautiful, she said, looking out at the stars. Yeah, it is. Do you ever miss being planetside? Sometimes. But space feels safer somehow. More anonymous. Jake turned to look at her. Anonymous? But you're part of the first contact team. Everyone knows who you are. Kira pulled her robes tighter around herself. Among my own people, I am known for the wrong reasons. Here, I am just another alien to most humans. What kind of wrong reasons? Kira was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was not born normal, even by Velani standards. My telepathic abilities were too strong, too wild. As a child, I could not control them. When I was upset or scared, my thoughts would burst out and affect everyone around me. Jake listened without interrupting. Imagine being a child and having everyone feel your nightmares. Imagine your fear making other children cry, your anger making them feel sick. I learned to stay away from others because my presence caused pain. That must have been incredibly lonely, Jake said. It was. My parents tried to help, but they were afraid of me too. They sent me to specialists who tried different treatments. Eventually, they found one that worked, but Kira touched her. Covered arms again. The scars, Jake said gently. Kira nodded. The treatment involved damaging the organs that produce our bioluminescence. It reduced my telepathic output, but it left permanent marks. Now I am neither fully telepathic nor fully normal. I exist between worlds. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. When I was a kid, I had severe dyslexia. Reading was almost impossible. For me, other kids called me stupid. Teachers got frustrated. I felt like there was something fundamentally wrong with my brain. Kira looked at him with interest. But you became a scientist. How? I found teachers who understood that my brain just worked differently. They helped me find ways to learn that worked for me. And eventually, I realized that seeing things differently could be a strength, not just a weakness. Your society accepts differences? We're getting better at it. We've learned that diversity makes us stronger. Some of our greatest scientists and artists were people who thought differently from everyone else. Kira stared out at the nebula. Velani society values harmony and conformity. Those who cannot fit the pattern are seen as flawed. Maybe that's their loss, Jake said. The next day, Commander Hayes called Jake to her office. The room was small and efficient, with a desk covered in reports and a wall screen showing ship status. Lieutenant, I need to discuss your work with the Velani representative, Hayes said without preamble. Kira is doing excellent work, Jake replied. Her insights have been invaluable. That may be, but I'm getting complaints from other departments. Dr. Collins says she's uncooperative. The diplomatic team says she doesn't participate in social functions. Some crew members find her presence disturbing. Jake felt his temper rise. Disturbing? She's done nothing but help us. She's secretive, Morrison. She avoids contact with others. She won't demonstrate basic Vellani abilities. For all we know, she could be hiding something important. She's hiding trauma, not secrets, Jake said. She needs understanding, not suspicion. Hayes leaned back in her chair. I'm considering requesting a different Vellani representative. Someone more open to cooperation. That would be a mistake, Jake said firmly. Kira understands both cultures in a way that others don't. She sees things from the perspective of someone who doesn't quite fit in either world. That's exactly what we need for this mission. You're too personally involved, Lieutenant. It's affecting your judgment. My judgment is fine. What's affecting the mission is our willingness to abandon someone just because they're different. Hayes studied him for a long moment. I'll give it another week. But if things don't improve, I'm making the request. That evening, Jake found Kira in the lab, working alone in the dim emergency lighting. She was bent over a microscope, her movements careful and precise. Working late? He asked. I do my best work when others are not around, she said without looking up. Jake pulled up a chair and sat down nearby. Kira, I want you to know that some people on this ship don't understand you, but that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. She finally looked at him. Commander Hayes spoke to you. How did you know? I may not use telepathy often, but I am still sensitive to strong emotions. Your anger when you returned was quite clear, Jake sighed. She's considering asking for a different Vellani representative. Kira nodded slowly. Perhaps that would be best. I am not good at representing my people. You're perfect at it, Jake said. You're just representing the parts of your people that others would rather ignore. The broken parts. The real parts. Every species has individuals who don't fit the standard mold. By hiding that, we're not getting the full picture of what Vellani are really like. Kira was quiet for a moment. Why do you defend me? You could work with any Vellani representative. Someone normal would be easier. Jake thought about it. Because easy isn't always right. And because I've learned that the most interesting discoveries often come from the most unexpected places. For the first time since he'd known her, Kira smiled. It was small and brief, but it was real. Thank you, Jake. Morrison, she said. For what? For sitting closer instead of walking away. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, during what started as an ordinary evening in the observation deck. Jake had made it a habit to invite Kira to watch the stars after their work sessions. She usually declined, but tonight she had agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching a nearby star cluster paint the darkness with silver light. Jake had learned not to push conversation with Kira. She would speak when she was ready. Jake, she said suddenly, may I ask you something personal? Of course. When you were young and struggling with your learning differences, did you ever hate yourself? The question caught Jake off guard. He thought carefully before answering. Yes, there were times when I felt like I was fundamentally broken. Like everyone else got an instruction manual for life that I never received. Kira nodded slowly. I understand that feeling. What made you ask? Kira pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her robes around herself like armor. Today marks 5 years since my treatment. 5 years since I was scarred. Jake waited quietly. He could sense that something important was coming. I have never told anyone the full story, Kira continued. Not even my family knows all of it. You don't have to tell me if you're not ready. I think I am ready. I think I need to tell someone who might understand. Kira was quiet for several minutes, gathering her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, as if she was seeing events from long ago. I was 12 years old when the worst incident happened. In Villani culture, 12 is when young people begin to learn advanced telepathic control. It is an important time, like your human coming-of-age ceremonies. Jake nodded, not wanting to interrupt. I was in class with 15 other young Villani. We were practicing group meditation, which requires very precise mental discipline. Everyone forms a shared mental space where thoughts flow gently between participants. Kira's hands began to shake. She clasped them together tightly. I was always nervous in group settings because my control was poor. But the teacher insisted I participate. She said I would never improve if I did not practice with others. What happened? I tried to join the meditation, but my mind was chaotic. I was afraid of losing control, which made my fear grow stronger. And in Villani telepathy, strong emotions can be contagious. Jake began to understand where this was going. My fear started affecting the other students. They began to feel anxious without knowing why. This made me more afraid, which made them more afraid. It became a feedback loop that I could not stop. Kira's voice grew quieter. One by one, the other students began to panic. Some started crying. Others became sick. 2 of them fainted from the intensity of the shared fear. And I could not shut it off. I could not stop broadcasting my terror to everyone around me. Kira, you were just a child. It wasn't your fault. The teacher had to call for help. It took 3 adult Villani working together to break the connection and calm everyone down. By then, I had traumatized 15 of my classmates and disrupted the entire school. Jake felt a surge of anger at the adults who had put a struggling child in that situation. After that day, everything changed, Kira continued. Parents forbade their children from being near me. Teachers refused to have me in regular classes. Even my own family looked at me differently. They loved me, but they were afraid of what I might do, so they sent you for treatment. Kira touched her covered arms. The scarring procedure is painful and permanent. They use controlled energy bursts to damage the bioluminescent organs. It reduces telepathic ability, but leaves ugly marks that never heal properly. But it helped with the control issues? Yes and no. I can no longer accidentally broadcast to groups of people. But I also cannot share thoughts normally, even when I want to. I am cut off from the natural communication that makes Villani feel connected to each other. Jake was beginning to understand the full scope of Kira's isolation. So you're alone, even when you're with your own people. Exactly. I am too damaged to be normal, but not damaged enough to be completely powerless. I exist in a space between worlds, belonging fully to neither. They sat in silence for a while. Jake struggled to find words that might help, but nothing seemed adequate. Is that why you volunteered for this mission? He finally asked. Partly. Working with humans meant I would not have to pretend to be normal. Your species does not expect telepathy from me. And if I am strange or different, you assume it is because I am alien, not because I am broken. Jake turned to face her fully. Kira, you are not broken. You're different, but that's not the same thing. How can you say that? You have seen my scars. You know what I am. I know you're brilliant. I know you're kind. I know you ask questions that no one else thinks to ask. I know you work harder than anyone else on this ship to understand both our species. Kira looked at him with confusion. But I am damaged goods. I cannot do what normal Villani do. So what? I can't do what normal humans do either. I read slowly. I have trouble processing auditory information, and I get overwhelmed in large groups. Does that make me broken? That is different. How is it different? Kira struggled to answer. Your differences do not hurt other people. Mine don't anymore because I learned to manage them. But when I was young, my struggles affected my family. My parents spent countless hours helping me with schoolwork. My sisters had to deal with a brother who couldn't keep up. We all suffered because of my brain differences. But they did not reject you. No, they didn't. And maybe that's the difference between our cultures, not between us as individuals. Jake moved his chair slightly closer to Kira's. She didn't pull away. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? He asked. Kira nodded hesitantly. I see someone who survived something traumatic and found a way to keep contributing to her society. I see someone who turned her isolation into empathy, who understands what it feels like to be different. I see someone whose unique perspective makes her better at bridging gaps between cultures, not worse. Tears began to flow down Kira's face. Jake had never seen a Vellani cry before. The tears caught the starlight and glittered like tiny diamonds. You do not understand, she whispered. I am marked. Everyone who sees me knows what I am. They know you survived. They know you're strong enough to keep going despite everything you've been through. They know I am defective. Jake felt frustration building in his chest. Not at Kira, but at the society that had convinced her she was worthless. Your people are wrong, he said firmly. If they can't see your value, that's their failure, not yours. Kira looked shocked. You cannot say such things about the Vellani. They are an advanced civilization. Advanced doesn't mean perfect. Every civilization has blind spots. Apparently, your people's blind spot is understanding that diversity can be a strength. But the incident at school ... was the result of putting an untrained child in a situation she couldn't handle, then blaming her when things went wrong. Any reasonable adult should have seen that coming. Kira stared at him. I have never heard anyone speak this way about Vellani society. Maybe it's time someone did. They sat together in the observation deck until late into the night. Kira told Jake more stories about her childhood, about the loneliness and the shame. Jake shared more about his own struggles with feeling different and the teachers who had helped him see his differences as strengths rather than weaknesses. As they prepared to leave, Kira did something unexpected. She reached out and briefly touched Jake's hand with her gloved fingers. Thank you, she said, for listening, for staying, for not seeing me the way I see myself. How do you see yourself? Jake asked. As something broken that cannot be fixed. And how do I see you? Kira thought for a moment. As something different that does not need fixing. Jake smiled. Exactly. As they walked back through the ship's corridors, Jake noticed that Kira held her head a little higher than usual. Her steps seemed less hesitant. It was a small change, but it felt like progress. He didn't know it yet, but this conversation would prove to be the turning point that changed everything for both of them. The call came early in the morning, waking Jake from deep sleep. Commander Hayes' voice crackled through the comm system. All senior staff to the main conference room. We have visitors. Jake dressed quickly and made his way through the ship's corridors. He could feel tension in the air. Crew members spoke in hushed voices, and there was an unusual amount of activity for this early hour. The conference room was already crowded when Jake arrived. Through the large viewing window, he could see a sleek Vellani vessel docked alongside. The New Dawn. It was beautiful, with smooth curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Commander Hayes stood at the head of the table, looking grim. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined by a delegation from the Vellani Council. They're here to expand the cultural exchange program. Dr. Collins leaned forward. That's wonderful news. More Vellani representatives will accelerate our research. Significantly. Perhaps, Hayes said carefully. But they've also expressed some concerns about our current exchange protocols. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. What kind of concerns? Before Hayes could answer, the conference room doors opened. 3 Vellani entered, moving with the graceful dignity Jake had come to associate with their species. They're bioluminescent. Patterns pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves of blue and silver light. The lead Villani was tall even by their standards, with intricate light patterns that spoke of high status. When he spoke, his voice was melodious but cold. "I am Council Member Taran. We come to evaluate the progress of cultural exchange and to address irregularities in the program." "Irregularities?" Hayes asked. "We understand you have been working with Kira of the Din Circle. This is ... concerning." Jake's hands clenched into fists under the table. "Kira has been an excellent representative. Her work has been invaluable." Theron's attention turned to Jake, and for a moment, Jake felt a gentle mental touch as the Villani tried to read his emotions. Jake pushed back instinctively, surprising the alien with his mental resistance. "You are the human who has been working closely with her," Taran said. "You may not understand the full situation." "Then explain it to me." Another Villani, smaller and younger than Taran, stepped forward. "I am Zera. I knew Kira before her ... incident. She is unstable, dangerous. Her presence here reflects poorly." "On our people? Dangerous?" Jake stood up abruptly. "She's the gentlest person I've ever met." "Gentleness can be deceptive," Taran said. "Kira's condition makes her unpredictable. She has already caused harm once. We cannot risk her doing so again, especially with an alien species." Dr. Collins looked confused. "What exactly is her condition?" Zera glanced at Taran, who nodded slightly. "Kira suffers from telepathic dysregulation. She cannot properly control her mental abilities. In our society, this is considered a serious disorder." "A disorder that was treated," Jake said firmly. "She told me about the scarring procedure. The treatment was partially successful," Taran admitted, "but it could not completely correct her fundamental defects. She remains a risk to others." Commander Hayes looked uncomfortable. "Are you asking us to remove her from the program?" "We are strongly suggesting it. We have brought more suitable representatives. Zera, for example, is a skilled communicator with perfect telepathic control. She would be much more appropriate for this important work." Jake felt rage building in his chest. "You're talking about abandoning someone because they don't fit your definition of normal. We are talking about maintaining the dignity and safety of both our species," Taran replied coolly. "Kira's work has been exceptional. She's provided insights that no one else could offer. Perhaps, but at what cost? Her presence here sends the wrong message about Villani capabilities and standards." Dr. Collins shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, if there are safety concerns—" "There are no safety concerns," Jake interrupted. "I've worked with Kira every day for weeks. She's never shown any sign of instability." "You are not trained to recognize the signs," Zera said. "Kira is skilled at hiding her condition, but it remains dangerous." Jake turned to Commander Hayes. "This is discrimination, pure and simple. They want to hide her because she's different." Hayes rubbed her temples. "Lieutenant Morrison, we need to consider all perspectives here. The only perspective that matters is whether Kira is doing good work, and she is." Theron's light patterns shifted to a colder blue. "Human, you do not understand Villani society. Some individuals are simply not suitable for important positions. This is for the greater good." "Whose greater good?" Jake demanded. "Yours?" "Because it's certainly not Kira's. Sometimes individual needs must be sacrificed for societal stability." Jake stared at the Villani delegation with growing disgust. "That's exactly the kind of thinking humans spent centuries overcoming. Your species is young," Taran said dismissively. "You will learn that idealism must sometimes give way to practicality. Our idealism is exactly what makes us strong." The argument was interrupted by a soft sound from the doorway. Jake turned to see Kira standing there, still wrapped in her heavy robes. Her face was pale, and Jake could see that she had heard enough to understand what was happening. I apologize for the disruption, she said quietly. I came to report for our scheduled session, but I can see that arrangements are being made for my replacement. Theron's patterns brightened with what Jake was learning to recognize as satisfaction. Kira, we have been discussing your situation with the humans. They understand now that changes must be made. I understand, Kira said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see pain in her eyes. No, Jake said firmly. I don't understand, and I don't accept it. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. Kira is staying. We're not throwing away the best working relationship we've established because you're embarrassed by her. Commander Hayes stood up. Lieutenant, that's not your decision to make. Then make the right decision, Commander. Don't let them bully us into abandoning someone who's done nothing wrong. Dr. Collins looked between Jake and the Vellani delegation. Perhaps we could work with both representatives? Get different perspectives? That would not be appropriate. Torrent said quickly. Kira's presence would contaminate any legitimate cultural exchange. Jake felt something snap inside him. Contaminate? She's a person, not a disease. She is a damaged individual whose condition makes her unsuitable for important work. Her condition makes her perfect for this work. She understands what it's like to be different, to not fit in. That gives her insights that your normal representatives could never provide. Zara stepped forward. You do not understand the shame she brings to our people. The only shame here is how your people treat those who are different. The room fell silent. Jake could feel everyone staring at him, but he didn't care. He was tired of watching Kira suffer because others couldn't see her value. In human society, Jake continued, we've learned that our greatest advances often come from those who think differently. Scientists with autism who see patterns others miss. Artists with depression who create beauty from pain. Leaders who overcame disabilities and learned to see the world in new ways. Theron's patterns flickered with what might have been anger. You compare Kira's disorder to human achievements. I'm saying that what you call a disorder, we might call a different way of experiencing the world. And different perspectives are valuable. She is broken, Zara said flatly. She's unique. And if you can't see the difference, that's your problem, not hers. Jake turned to Commander Hayes. I'm requesting that Kira remain as our primary Vellani representative. Her work has been exemplary, and replacing her now would be a mistake. Hayes looked around the room, clearly struggling with the decision. The political implications of offending the Vellani delegation are obvious, but Jake's passion was compelling. I need time to consider all options, she said finally. Of course, Taran said smoothly. We will wait for your decision. But we hope you will choose wisdom over sentiment. As the meeting broke up, Jake approached Kira. She was standing by the window, looking out at the Vellani ship. I should go, she said softly. This conflict is not worth it. Yes, it is, Jake said. You're worth it. I am one damaged individual. The relationship between our species is more important. The relationship between our species will be built on a lie if we pretend that differences don't exist or don't matter. Kira turned to look at him. You would risk your career for me? I would risk my career for what's right. And keeping you here is right. For the first time since the delegation arrived, Kira smiled slightly. You are very stubborn, Jake Morrison. It's one of humanity's best traits, Jake replied. We don't give up on people, even when it would be easier to do so. Even when those people are alien and broken? Especially then. As they stood together by the window, Jake made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, he would not let Kira face it alone. Sometimes the most important battles were fought, not with weapons or words, but simply by refusing to walk away when others needed you to stay. The next few days would test that promise in ways Jake couldn't yet imagine. 3 days later, Commander Hayes called another meeting. This time, The conference room was packed with both human and Vellani representatives. Jake sat near the front, with Kira beside him. She had barely spoken since the Vellani delegation arrived, and Jake could see the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. "I've made my decision regarding our cultural exchange program," Hayes announced. "Lieutenant Morrison and Kira will present their joint research to both delegations tomorrow. After that presentation, we'll determine the best path forward." Theron's light patterns shifted to an agitated orange. "This is highly irregular. Kira should not be representing our people in any official capacity." "With respect," Hayes replied, "she's been representing your people quite well for the past month. I think it's fair to let her work speak for itself." Jake felt a surge of hope. But when he looked at Kira, she seemed more frightened than relieved. "I cannot do this," she whispered to him as the meeting ended. "Speaking to a group, being examined by my own people. What if I lose control?" "You won't," Jake said firmly. "And even if something goes wrong, I'll be right there with you." That evening, they worked late in the lab, preparing their presentation. Jake had suggested they focus on their most significant discovery, how studying the differences between human and Vellani neural systems had revealed new possibilities for treating brain injuries in both species. "Your unique perspective made this breakthrough possible," Jake told Kira as they reviewed their data. "No one else would have thought to compare telepathic dysregulation with human neurological conditions." "It was obvious to me because I experience both," Kira said. "My damaged telepathic centers function similarly to certain human brain differences." "Exactly. That's why your voice matters in this exchange." As they worked, Jake noticed Kira's hands, shaking more than usual. Her breathing was shallow, and she kept glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to burst in and stop her. "Talk to me," Jake said gently. "What's really scaring you?" Kira set down her datapad and wrapped her arms around herself. "The last time I was in front of a group of Vellani, I hurt people. What if it happens again?" "It won't. Your telepathic output was reduced by the scarring, remember? But not eliminated. And emotions can amplify what remains. If I become frightened or upset during the presentation," Jake moved his chair closer to hers, "and I'll help you through it. That's what partners do." "Partners? That's what we are, isn't it? A team?" Kira looked at him with something like wonder. "I have never had a partner before." "Well, you do now." The next morning arrived too quickly. The main conference room had been reconfigured for the presentation, with screens and projectors positioned, so both human and Vellani representatives could see clearly. Jake arrived early to test the equipment and found Kira already there, sitting in the corner with her head down. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said honestly, "but I will try." The room filled quickly. Jake recognized most of the human crew, but there were also several Vellani he hadn't seen before. Taran and Zera sat in the front row, their expressions skeptical. Behind them, other Vellani whispered among themselves, their light patterns flickering. With what Jake was learning to recognize as gossip or judgment, Commander Hayes called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Morrison and Kira will now present their findings from the Cultural Exchange Program." Jake stood up, feeling nervous energy coursing through him. Beside him, Kira rose slowly, her robes rustling softly. "Thank you, Commander," Jake began. "Over the past month, Kira and I have made several important discoveries about the similarities and differences between human and Vellani biology." He launched into their prepared presentation, discussing neural pathways, healing processes, and sensory differences. Kira added her own observations, her voice quiet but clear. Jake could see some of the humans leaning forward with interest, but the Vellani delegation remained stone-faced. "Our most significant finding," Jake continued, "came from an unexpected Source: Kira's unique neural configuration allowed us to identify parallels between telepathic regulation and human neurological diversity. Taran interrupted. Are you suggesting that Kira's disorder is somehow beneficial? I'm suggesting that what you call a disorder is actually a different way of processing information, Jake replied. And that difference led to insights neither of our species could have reached alone. Kira stepped forward slightly. May I explain? Jake nodded encouragingly. In studying human conditions like autism and ADHD, I recognized patterns similar to my own neural activity, Kira said. Both involve sensory processing differences and challenges with social interaction, but both also involve unique strengths. Zara's patterns flickered with what might have been irritation. You cannot compare yourself to humans. Our species are completely different. Actually, we're more similar than you might think, Kira replied, gaining confidence. Both humans and Vellani have individuals whose brains work differently from the majority. The difference is in how our societies respond to that diversity. Dr. Collins leaned forward. What do you mean? Human society has learned to accommodate and value neurological differences. You have created support systems, alternative learning, methods, and recognition that different minds can contribute in different ways. Jake felt pride swelling in his chest as Kira found her voice. Vellani society, despite our technological advancement, still sees neural differences as flaws to be corrected or hidden, Kira continued. We have not learned that diversity of thought can be a strength. The room was completely silent now. Even Theron's light patterns had stilled. Furthermore, Kira said, my experience of existing between telepathic and non-telepathic states has given me unique insights into how both humans and Vellani process information and emotion. This perspective has been crucial to our research. Success, Taran finally spoke. Even if your condition contributed to this research, it does not change the fact that you are unsuitable as a representative of our people. Why? Jake demanded. Because she doesn't fit your narrow definition of normal? Because she is marked, Zara said flatly. Her scars advertise her defects to everyone who sees her. Something in Kira's posture changed. Jake saw her straighten, her head lifting higher than he had ever seen it. You are right, Kira said quietly. I am marked. But not in the way you think. Before anyone could react, Kira reached up and pulled back her hood. Then, slowly and deliberately, she began to unfasten her heavy outer robe. Kira, Jake said softly, you don't have to ... Yes, I do, she said. I have been hiding long enough. The robe fell away, revealing the scarred patterns across her arms and neck. Where other Vellani had smooth, flowing lines of bioluminescence, Kira had rough, darkened patches where the healing light had been damaged. But as she stood there, no longer hiding, something remarkable happened. The undamaged portions of her patterns began to glow more brightly than Jake had ever seen them. They pulsed with soft, warm light that seemed to respond to her emotions. And those emotions, Jake realized, were no longer shame and fear. They were determination and pride. These scars mark my survival, Kira said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. They mark my journey from a frightened child to someone who found a way to contribute despite her differences. They mark my refusal to let others define my worth. Several Vellani in the audience shifted uncomfortably. A few humans looked moved by her words. You say I am unsuitable to represent our people, Kira continued. But I represent the Vellani you prefer to pretend don't exist. The ones who struggle, who don't fit perfectly into your ideal society, who need accommodation and understanding rather than judgment. Theron's patterns flickered with what Jake now recognized as anger. You should not speak for those individuals. Why not? I am one of them. And there are more of us than you want to admit. Jake stepped closer to Kira not to protect her, but to show his support. In human society, we have a saying, "Nothing about us without us." It means that decisions affecting a group should include voices from that group. Kira speaks for Vellani who have been silenced, Jake continued. Her perspective is exactly what this cultural exchange needs. Dr. Collins stood up. If I may, I'd like to address the research implications of what we've heard today. He activated a wall screen showing brain scans and neural pathway diagrams. Kira's insights have led to breakthrough understanding in treating neural conditions in both species. Her different way of processing information allowed her to see connections that none of us noticed. He turned to face the Vellani delegation. From a purely scientific standpoint, losing her perspective would set back our research significantly. Commander Hayes nodded slowly. I've reviewed their joint work. It's exceptional. Some of the most innovative thinking I've seen in years. Taran was clearly frustrated. Innovation means nothing if it comes from a defective source. Defective? Jake's voice was sharp with anger. She just gave you insights that could help treat neural conditions in your own people, and you call her defective? Her condition makes her unreliable. Her condition makes her irreplaceable. The argument was interrupted by an unexpected voice. One of the younger Vellani in the back of the room stood up slowly. Council Member Taran, I request permission to speak. Taran looked surprised. Nira, what is it?